All right, we are live here on the Dick and Russ podcast today. No special guests this week. We will have a special guest next week. We'll be talking about relationships today, specifically Chloe and Sammy's relationship. These past 3 years or so. Sammy, good to have you again.
Always good to be here, Russ.
Russ. Oh yeah, right. So you and Chloe, about 3 years, around this month, right?
Pretty much 3 years.
Middle of February. How'd you meet her?
Mutual friends. My friend from high school, Pablo, was dating Chloe's roommate, Annie. Okay. And I met them because they started hanging out like at their apartment, and I'm good friends with Pablo, so I met her through that. Cool. And so that's the beginning. That's the origin.
Dang. What how was the relationship when it first started? Were you guys was it like an immediate attraction? Was it kind of like how about this? Where were you mentally? Like what was your headspace at when you first, said, "Okay, I want to talk to this girl"?
Yeah, so my whole life, like, I've kind of only been interested in like real relationships, not like flings. Not like I don't want like a partial relationship with a girl. Like that's basically what it was. I didn't want like to just have a physical thing without any of like the hanging out and the emotion and like the plans and stuff. So it was really weird for me because Chloe was dating someone when I first met her for like a month or so, or a couple months.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if this is an option, but like I'm starting to grow an attraction with her. And so I was instantly drawn to her just because she is like a very interested person. Like she's interested in people. She's interested in like asking questions and like wanting to get to know people. To me, that's like one of the most attractive things a person can have is just to be interested. Right. Because like it's not enough just to be an interesting person for me. Because I think this has been my problem. I think that's like something I lacked so much, and I still am working on it. But just being like genuinely interested in everyone around you, right, to me is like the coolest thing for a human to be. Right. So that was the first thing that struck me. She was just like always open to like everyone who came up to her, and like I thought she was instantly gorgeous, right? Like not like immediately my like standard view of my type, but like the personality and like the way she was acting and like being super extroverted, I was like, that's definitely what I want in someone. So yeah, that's kind of how it all began. I remember like one of the first things that really stuck out to me was at karaoke actually. She was just dancing as she was singing, and I was like, wow, that takes balls. Like, because to me, I'm like, I'm really timid, and like I have a hard time like expressing myself in front of other people, right, in that kind of way. And for her to just be like let loose, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Yeah. So I kind of just saw her as like a really like open book, pretty much, and I was like, I really want to get to know her more. So yeah,
there you go. At the time of like meeting her, did you already know what you wanted, or were there certain things that you kind of like were looking for, or were you not looking at all? Was it just kind of like it just happened to be there, and then you're like, wow, this is But the main one is like, did you know what you wanted? Because I feel like that's a big part of it.
Dude, my whole life I've never known what I wanted. I think like I've continually started to realize like over the past few years, like I can't just know what I want from thinking it through. Like that just doesn't work for me. And maybe it does for other people, and that's great, but I've thought so much about what I want in a girl, and it turns out like I'm gonna marry Chloe, by the way. And it turns out that like a lot of the things that I love most about Chloe are things that I didn't realize I wanted, and
Yeah.
I didn't realize that they were as important as they are to me now. So it's like if I had just like from the get go been like, oh, this is what I want, and I'm not gonna settle, I would have actually been settling for something that I didn't actually want because
Right.
I was just focusing on an idea instead of like how it actually looks in a relationship. Um, and yeah, so I didn't really know what I wanted, and Chloe um, really kind of showed me what it is I actually want in a person just by spending time with her.
Right.
And yeah, so
I guess it's kind of like what you say. I think you talk about it in your book too that you're writing with religion is if you just focus on one certain thing that you want, you close yourself off from a lot of different learning experiences, right?
Right.
So in essence, it's kind of like the same with relationships with other people as well. If you just focus on one thing, then you're not really listening and growing and learning about what the other person has to offer.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. I definitely had a really like narrow point of view for like what I wanted in a person, and um, yeah, I think just having that openness of like, you know, this person may not meet my like whatever I'm looking for right now, but like it's still worth getting to know them. You know, uh, especially if like if so. For instance, I dated this girl who shall not be named, uh, and I thought she was like the most gorgeous person I've ever seen. Right, like 10 out of 10 in every single like appearance aspect. And I was like, how in the hell am I dating this person right now?
Yeah.
We went on like a couple dates, but I slowly started to realize, okay, there's like close to zero chemistry, like me and this person, and it's not like it's like awkward.
Right.
It's just like there's nothing here, you know.
Yeah.
And like it's not that like she was like boring or like I was boring, whatever it is. Like we just didn't really connect, and like to me that is something that I realized is so freaking important for a relationship is like how much chemistry do you have, you know? Because like for me, chemistry is like feeling just completely yourself with another person and like connecting in that same like I don't know how to describe it specifically, but just being able to connect on a very intimate level without really trying really hard, you know, not trying to like force the chemistry. It just happens.
So it's like fluidity with another person.
So that to me is kind of what chemistry is, and like I had nothing with it with that girl. So for me, I was like, okay, well, here's this person that like appearance wise checked off every box, like athletic, you know, she didn't have a great sense of humor, but she had like she understood humor. Like she wasn't like the funniest person. But I was like, surely she'll check off enough boxes. And then third date comes along and like we break up and I'm like, honestly, I'm kind of glad, you know, like that didn't keep going because it was just wasn't like super, I don't know, fulfilling, exciting, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty much like what I'm trying to say is like whatever ideal you might have in your head, it might turn out totally different on a case by case basis with each person. Like every person is unique in ways that you can't just say, oh, they check off these 10 boxes. You know, like I don't think it makes sense to think of people in that way because we are fluid, like you talked about. We are way more complex than that to the point that it might be worthwhile to like have an idea, but to not let it prevent you from pursuing relationships with people who don't automatically fit in those boxes, right?
Right.
So for me, I think that's like what I did with Chloe because like she was a Christian, and that's something that you mentioned. Like she was a Christian, and to me that was like a big box. I was like, I don't know if I can really go through this because at the time I was a hardcore atheist.
No, and I remember we
And,
used to we would go through and like do the numbers and
oh
statistically
man.
how many people right call themselves a Christian or are looking for someone who's Christian.
Hmm.
Which, by the way, I think has shifted a lot in these past 2 years.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know about you, but at least
dude,
with COVID, like
crazy.
I've been hearing so many more Christians saying, "Oh, spiritual, but not necessarily tied to one." And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, what does that look like, right? It's like, and it's changed completely these past 2 years, which I think is a good thing,
yeah,
because then like we were talking about, you're open to other
right.
possibilities, other ways to grow.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous thing in the world is not confidence, more like certainty and like just complete
Mm,
assurance of like being certain. Um, and if people step away from like labels, I think that's one step in the right direction of like, now I'm more open minded.
right,
I'm not tied to this set of rules or ideas or anything like that anymore.
right.
But that's not to say like there's no merit in that kind of culture or that uh like having a label, because I still think it's useful.
Right, and it helps
Um
ground you too a
yeah.
lot of time.
Yeah. But I do think it's on the whole good, like what's going on uh with people kind of looking at reevaluating the church and kind of deconstructing Christianity, which my book might be called when it's done.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think it's great. I think it's really good.
yeah. There's this quote that I heard that I really like, which was, "Religion teaches obedience, whereas spirituality teaches discipline."
Oh wow.
Which I thought, it's pretty cool because, and I'm not saying all religions are just saying like just do this, do that, but
Yeah.
it can get to that point where it almost feels like you're checking off a list of like, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, then this is I fit into this role, I fit into this child of God, I fit it right, and it's like it's not so much about the obedience part, it's that connection, right, and the discipline of, no, I want to do these things because they are good, because they'll
Right.
help others, because they'll help me build relationships with others, with God, with whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, don't allow it to just teach you obedience, but be disciplined in the things that that are good for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because like in general, that is how it appears. But at the same time, it's good to point out like there's no like set in stone like this is what religion is or does
Hmm.
affect in society. Because like I've seen, I mean, more people than I can count, like recently, who don't fit into the box of like obedience. Like I think, uh, I think it's only in certain areas, but it's also like certain cultures. Like
Yeah.
it's more for me a cultural thing of like in this area, this is
Hmm.
how Christianity might look, and then in another area, it looks completely different, right?
Right.
So like the religion itself doesn't seem like it's changing that much, but because of the cultural differences, it changes like dramatically.
Right.
Um,
Right.
from like yeah, from like obedience to maybe something more like discipline.
That's one thing that I did notice too. Being a Spanish major and whatnot, having gone to a Christian university, one thing that I learned a lot about was that in Central America, it's basically a mix of indigenous cultures and Christianity,
Mm.
and so it's a Catholicism
Yeah.
that's half indigenous culture and then half Christian Catholic beliefs. So you got
Dang.
like this hybrid Catholicism Christianity,
Dang.
and a lot of it, that's why they're very heavy on tradition, right? So obviously like you go somewhere like Spain, traditions heavy, right? But then you got like these almost rituals in Central America that a
Yeah.
lot of people do, and it's like the culture, and where you're at really does affect the religion, the obedience factor, all of that good stuff. And that's like one of the clear ways that I've seen it in my life. But anyways, we're
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
to relationships.
So going back to Chloe, and yeah, so that was initially a big hurdle for me to kind of get over with, because she ended up breaking up with her boyfriend, and that gave me like the moment to start thinking through it. Like, do I want to pursue a relationship with someone who I know is incompatible in that way? And for me at the time was extremely important.
Mm.
And for most Christians, it is really important to have that level of compatibility in a lot of the ways that matter to being a Christian, right? So I was like, do I pursue this? And I ended up just being like, okay, I don't need to like figure this out right now. Like, let me just get to know her, you know?
Yeah.
So I just started getting to know her, and we started hanging out, and instant chemistry, like off the charts chemistry. Just instantly, we felt, both of us felt like it was just like a very safe, homey feeling being with each other. That I certainly didn't feel before, and I'm pretty sure she hadn't either. And that just initial like bond that we had, I think largely was because, one, like I said earlier, she's an extremely open person, and has been ever since I met her. So she was just super honest, like out of this world honest about her life and what she was going through on the first date. And I remember being like, that is the most fucking attractive thing I've ever seen. Someone just not care about what this may like make him perceive of me. Like, it's just like, I'm just gonna fucking say it, and like if you take it, you can take it however you want. This is me. And I was like, that is confidence, right? Like, that is ownership of who you are. And I thought it was like the most beautiful thing ever. And I'm like, I'm pursuing this girl 100%. Once, right after that date, I'm like, 100% I'm pursuing this person. And yeah, ever since then, it did continue to be a struggle with religion because, like I said at the time, I was an atheist. And I would go further than just say I was an atheist. Like, I think I was an anti-theist at the time. Like, I thought it was more harmful for there to be religious people than not. And I'm very far away from that now. But that was a major conflict because, yeah, I don't know if you have any questions, but this is a really big deal, like in our relationship, where I really wanted Chloe to have an open mind with religion specifically, right? And everything else, she was really open-minded, like just completely open book, like I was just talking about, right? But when it came to religion, I was like, oh, I got to get her to be more open-minded, and that was definitely not the right approach. Like, I can't force someone to be open-minded. Like, what, I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, I was like, it was more than just trying to get her to be open-minded. I think a part of me was like trying to convince her out of Christianity. And I don't like admitting that because, like, I think that's a horrible approach, and I don't think at the time I would have admitted I was doing that, but that's kind of how it looked. And that obviously led to a lot of conflict. And yeah, so those conversations were probably the biggest reasons why we almost didn't end up staying together. Within a couple months, we had a really serious conversation about it. And we ended up both coming to the conclusion that we're incompatible in that way, in too significant of a way for it to be worth like pursuing a long relationship together. And I created this philosophy which allowed us to keep going, which we can get into. But yeah, that has always been like the biggest hurdle for us.
What role? So obviously, her being Christian, you being atheist at the time. What role did? Because I know relationships aren't just, especially if you're marrying someone, it's not just you and her, right? It's families involved as well. What role did that play, and how did her family, like, what were they kind of thinking? Meanwhile, all this is going on.
So yeah, that's a really important variable here because for me, being an atheist, I didn't really have, and my family isn't like particularly religious in any way. So for me, I didn't have any like ties. It was just based on my perspectives, right? Like I didn't have anything on the line other than my own perspectives. For Chloe, her whole entire family at the time was very Christian and pretty traditional in the aspect of like really wanting a family to be a cohesive like Christian family. And for like at least 9 months, I was like a secret. My relationship with Chloe was kept a secret from her family, uh, because she was like, I want you to get to know them more, or I want to like make sure this is like real before you get to know them, before like we commit to doing this, because she's like, I know it's going to be hard. And yeah,
I was just gonna say, how do you feel about that? Because I know I mean, there's a certain aspect of like when a girl really really likes you, she's trying to keep you a secret, right? I mean, I've been in that place before where it's like they're trying to do things right, so they're like trying to navigate through their family. What did that look like for you, and patience and whatnot? Because I know it gets frustrating.
yeah.
Having to go through that, and there's no like timeline when okay, like this is when it's gonna work out for sure. You're just kind of sitting there and saying, okay, like when's the time?
I was not super patient, but I don't know. I would definitely want to hear Chloe's perspective on that, because like from my point of view, I was like coming off as like really hurt by it, and I think I even mentioned it to her a couple times how like it really got to me
Yeah,
that like I was like seen as this thing that wasn't worth introducing to a family. And I think here's what I said. I was like, I understood her reasons fully. I was like, I also agree it makes sense for us to like wait and see if this is like a serious thing. But at the same time, I was like, just the fact that like it's just this like conceptual thing, it's like I'm not this horrible person, like I'm not like doing anything wrong in my
right.
life that should merit me being kept a secret. So, and it was two very conflicting emotions for me,
Yeah,
because on one end I was like, I totally understand you, Chloe, and I like I think it actually makes sense for us to figure it out before we bring it to the table, because we're gonna have to figure it out even more at that point.
yeah,
But then the other half of me was like, dude, it feels like garbage feeling like you're not meeting a standard, uh,
yeah.
and you have no control in the matter.
Right,
So it was really hard.
right. I totally get that. What Okay, so we talked about family a little, not meeting up to standards. So what happens? What happens after that?
Yeah. So
And you said you had like a philosophy that you kind of made up
right.
to with Chloe, kind of like a solution. Meanwhile, it's like you guys, yeah.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
This was pretty funny. I actually was I got in this line of thinking from the show Louis. Um, in one of the episodes, Louis C.K. It's his show. He is talking to this old wise man who like uh, is talking to Louis, and Louis just broke up with this girl who like went back to her home country,
Yeah,
and he entered the relationship with this girl like for a month. It was like a month contract pretty much, because she had to go home.
yeah,
And he knew that at the end of the relationship, like it was gonna end, and like he was gonna be sad.
yeah,
He's gonna feel this heartbreak. And what Louis says to the old man is like, you know, I mean, why even go through with it if I'm gonna feel this like sadness? He's like, it wasn't worth it.
yeah,
And the old man is like, wow, misery is wasted on the miserable. And at first, I like didn't for a while I didn't understand what that meant. But then I started thinking in kind of like what he may have been trying to mean from it. And that got me towards the idea of like it being so the heartbreak he feels is only as strong as it is because of how meaningful the relationship he had with her, right? So to see the heartbreak as like a negative thing is to completely miss the point that it's only the heartbreak only exists because of what the love was. Right? And like the only way that you have love in the first place is by being willing to embrace heartache, to embrace grief.
Right.
And when you see it that way, it's no longer just grief. It's no longer just pain and suffering.
Right.
It now is transformed into another expression of love, into another expression of how much you actually cared for this person. And right after the old man said misery is wasted on the miserable, he says, this is what you've been waiting for this whole time. You know, like you've got this sweet, sweet nugget of love right now that you're going through, and you want to throw it away. Yeah. It's like you've got it all wrong. And I'm like, wow, that is so fucking true. Like, how? And for me, this actually happened in my relationship with Chloe, where we basically broke up at one point. Mm-hmm. We broke up because we basically couldn't solve this problem. We're like, this is too big of an issue. We just don't know what to fucking do with it. And I like there were specifics with it, but it's not like really that important. It's like going to church and like me wanting her to consider other things. But once we broke up, I felt more love than I ever have for any person in my life. Like I was flooded with emotions of like gratitude for the entire relationship. And it fucking hurt. Yeah. It hurt so much. I was like, I cannot believe that I'm not going to be with this person anymore. Like this is just insane to me. Yeah. But it was those two together. And if you can see that it is those two together, like it's no longer a tragedy. It becomes something beautiful. And to me, that's the philosophy I started creating. I was like, why would we end a relationship early just because we know it's going to be painful in the end? Right. Like we at for a while, we were like, it's 100% going to end. And we're like, it makes total sense to keep going in this relationship because that's what the beauty is. It's like it's not in perpetuity. It's not in how long this thing goes on for. Right. It's in what we're getting right now. You know, like this obsession in our culture with like lifelong contracts and like things continuing into the future. I think is largely a sickness because it doesn't allow people to see that point, like that the beauty of mine and Chloe's relationship was never the point that it was going to keep on going after. Mm-hmm. It was the chemistry, the fucking amazing times we had, the moments we shared, and you know, just the bond that we had that whole time through, and the growth that we both shared together was just out of this world that we both never experienced. To me, to say that that is all not worthwhile just because we know the relationship is going to end and therefore we will feel pain, to me is just to completely miss the point, right? Yeah. That it's not about continuity. It's all about what are you getting from it right now. Yeah. And that's just say my point of view, you know, like other people, maybe continuity is super important to them. Right. But that's where we were at, and that's what kept us going for a while, even though we were like, yeah, we're not compatible. So yeah.
Well, you're saying that you guys weren't compatible. I would say you guys are very compatible. I would say the only reason you would think that you're not compatible is because differentiating views of religion, or points of you know, or belief systems. But other than that, I feel like compatibility was actually pretty strong. You guys had same common core values. You know, there were a lot of similarities between you two, and the differences didn't seem so big except for that one.
Yeah, it's funny. I I couldn't see it that way at the time, and I had multiple conversations about this with people in my life, and yeah, I think because of where I was at, it honestly was incompatible for me, just because I wasn't being open minded enough. You know, like I was so focused on trying to open her mind with religion.
Very ironic.
Yeah, like it's the most super ironic. Like that I was actually the one who was closed minded because I couldn't figure out a way for like her and her religion doing her own thing to work with me. And
Mm,
that took me a while, right? That took me a while for me to be like, wait, why am I so obsessed with like what you're doing with your religion? Like this is just bizarre for me to be so focused on this. And yeah, like under the surface of that, we are extremely compatible. Like our values, the way we want to live life, and like the things we like to do, the people we want to really pour into and like hang around. Uh, like what we want to have with like kids or not kids, and like just all around lifestyle was just all around compatible, right? Um, so it really was just that thing that was the sticking point, and it took maybe a year for me to be like, wow, I'm starting to see how you believing in God, you like going to church and all these things really isn't like impacting my life in any way. So why would I want to take that away from you? Why would I want to take meaning out of your life,
right. Yeah.
just because of what I think the truth is, right?
Mm.
So I got to that point, and I'm pretty sure at that point I had told her like I'm okay, but I can't really give you what you might need, right? Like I'm okay with where you're at, but I was like you might need more than what I have to offer. And that was another point where we like almost broke up, but we ended up keep going. And so over time, I think what kind of happened was we both started to become more open to the idea of like sharing life with someone who is gonna have a different perspective. Uh, but we just realized that the ways that we can share this life um, don't have to go into those other areas, right? Like they don't have to all include everything. Like you don't have to match on every single thing for it to be really, really, really compatible.
Right.
And yeah, now we're at a point where like it's it's not an issue whatsoever, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like I'd argue that time uh, plays a big role into that because compatibility over time just kind of works itself out. I think if you're actually really compatible with someone,
yeah,
I think if you can last 3 years with a person and still feel that spark, still see the light in it, that's a good sign of compatibility.
yeah,
Obviously, you're gonna have your hard times. You're gonna go through questions and moments of okay, are we gonna still do this or are we not? But I think a big part of it is just sticking to it for a while and then
yeah,
seeing, um, but yeah, I would say time because, like you said, right, it took you a while to figure out that hey, maybe I should stop just trying to get her to be open minded and take a step back and say, okay, what am I doing?
yeah,
Right? It's like, well,
yeah.
what am I contributing? How am I seeing this? Right? So, but what's your take on time? And because I know you're the one that actually told me this. It's not a matter of what or who; it's a matter of when. Which tells me time plays a big importance in a lot of things for you. So what's that look like?
Yeah, so I think with time, especially like time within a relationship, uh, is you can't really know how to work things out with someone in really healthy ways if you've only been together for a small amount of time. Because like I said earlier, people are so complex. Like what looks like problem solving and compassion and understanding is going to look different based on each person, right? Like every person is going to kind of need a different approach for them to feel like heard, for them to feel like safe, etc. But this aspect of time within a relationship, I think it's just a growing and understanding of someone. And when you just start gradually growing understanding of someone, you start to see like the whys behind their character, and like you start to see um like different patterns about them that you start to learn, oh, this is how like she responds to like criticism. This is how she responds to me challenging her. This is how she responds to like etc. Right? And it's kind of just going through that growth together, uh, and that understanding of each other that allowed us to kind of see how it's not an issue. So this part's kind of hard to put into words, but how do I put this? You see where I'm kind of going? So give me a moment here. Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is like when you get to a certain point with someone, you start to see like beyond the surface level, like just like beliefs, right? You start to see how it actually looks in their lives. And I think it's hard to see initially like why the beliefs don't matter that much, because I think in our culture beliefs like are thought of as like this all powerful like dictator of our lives, when in reality like our lives usually are not in total sync with our beliefs. And you could ask the question, well then do you really believe it if you don't act as if you actually believe it, which I think is a good question to ask. But I think just you start to learn that within a relationship, or at least I learned that in a relationship, that the way that we were acting and the way that we were um, trying to like always look out for the betterment of each other. Mm-hmm. We were always interested in the well-being of each other. Right. We're like, I mean, what more could you want out of a partner? Like right. It was never a matter of uh like you need to believe this. Like I was always trying to get her to just be open-minded, and she was just wanting a specific like a couple specific things that a Christian partner would provide. But we started realizing over time that like, okay, do we really need those aspects in our lives when like one, like the church really isn't what we're gonna be pouring into, like we started asking bigger questions. Like instead of just focusing on the labels, we're like, okay, what does this actually mean? Like, why do you want me to go to church with you? Like, why do you want me to be open-minded? And I think we just started to see that like the way that was acting in our lives, the way it was playing out, was completely compatible and like just totally what we wanted. Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to put all this into words because it's like a really gradual thing, but yeah.
Do you think? And here's a question that I asked just because of you know, you tend to see it in a lot of religions is the image that a relationship kind of portrays to each other's families, what it portrays to the church. I mean, I think, at least from what I've heard from a lot of our Christian friends, right? There's like a certain uh type of husband that you want, right? Certain qualities. You know, you would argue you had a lot of those qualities, even though there were certain qualities that you just couldn't fulfill, just weren't a Christian. Um, how big of a role does image play? Do you think it's more prevalent, like you know, within males or females? And what does that look like? What are some of the challenges with that?
I honestly think it only is important for people who are not willing to to get to know someone.
Mm.
I think that's it. I think if you're not willing to get to know that person because of the image, then it's going to be important. But if you're willing to get to know the person, then whatever image, whatever label, or whatever like group someone falls into, uh, is like I was saying at the very beginning. Like we're way more complicated than that, and you'll find in understanding someone that you at first might think is just totally radical or totally like off the wall and could never be compatible, just just allowing yourself to get to know the person is what allows those walls to come down of like resistance uh in the idea of like this could work. So yeah, for her family, I think those walls have been up and are still somewhat up towards our relationship. Even though they're on the whole accepting of everything.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, at the beginning it was a really big hurdle because I just don't fit a label, and that to me is really sad uh, because of what I learned going through the relationship with Chloe. Is like it's it's just missing the point of life, like just reducing anyone to a label, even if you completely disagree with that label, uh, is always going to be just the wrong approach. Um, so yeah, I think it plays a huge factor in our society because like our society is ruled by labels and identities, and you know, so yeah, it's a huge hurdle for people.
Um, let's say for other couples out there that are kind of trying to navigate through family, and kind of like that image and what they, because I'm sure right now we're talking about just within Christianity and what it looks like, right, to be a Christian couple or whatever that means. I'm sure there's a lot of couples out there who are, let's say they're gay, right? They have to hide it from family, friends, from, we have maybe it's different religions that aren't allowed to be with each other and they're, in a relationship. Uh, what kind of advice would you give to them as far as timing and uh, how to navigate through family and things like
Yeah,
that?
the most important thing I would say is you are your own person. You are not an extension, uh, like you are not an extension of your family's identity. That to me is a source of extreme dissatisfaction in life and in feeling trapped and in feeling like it's not really your life, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like having parents who who are like you have to do anything to me is, especially once you reach adulthood, like it's it's not the way a parent, it's not their role, you know? Like parents should not be seen as like this authoritarian figure who's like has any say in what you do with your life, you know? They can offer advice and guidance, because I think that's the role of a parent. They're more of like someone who's supposed to guide you through life. They're not like raising sheep, you know? Like you're not cattle. You are your own being, and you do not have to abide by whatever your family says. And I talk about this a lot in my book, where you cannot live someone else's life. Like this is precious, dude. This is fucking magic. What you have right now, you are not going to get another chance at this thing in the way that you are right now. This is your fucking chance. You cannot waste it living someone else's life, living by someone else's rules when you have completely opposing convictions, when you have completely different picture for what you want your life to be. That is a tragedy. You have to live your own life. So that to me is one of the most important things to mention first. But aside from that, this is what I told Chloe's dad when I called him over the phone, asking him that I want to marry Chloe. Not asking him, telling him I want to marry his daughter. I told him, what is it about being a Christian that I differ from so significantly that it 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 will not work between me and Chloe? Like, I'm like, I want to donate to charity. You know, I want to love God and love my neighbor. You know, like I I'm willing to like go to church with Chloe. I'm willing to do anything that she wants me to do. I'll be there for her. Like, what do you want from me, right? And uh, they like pretty quickly started to like see that. They're like, we understand how much you care for Chloe, and we're now seeing that that is the most important thing. But they were also like, we're starting to see what actually matters about being a Christian, because like you look at what does it mean to be a Christian? Like it's obviously not the label, you know? Yeah. Like I don't even think people were necessarily calling themselves Christians at the time that Jesus was alive. And you know, all the people that Jesus said go healed, you've been healed by your faith, you know? Um uh for like the woman who touches his cloth or whatever, she's like, I'm sick. And like he's like, okay, I'll heal you. You're healed by your faith. Um that to me is not saying you need to blindly believe this thing. You need to make this a part of who you are. That to me is saying you were open to the possibility that you would be healed. And because of that faith, you were healed. You know?
Right.
It's less of like you have to believe this thing, right. And it's more of like an openness for what is possible and for how to live your life. And so yeah, I know I'm talking in rambling sentences. So to make it a little more concise, just focus on what actually matters for the actions in your life, for how things play out in reality, rather than just in this belief conceptual world. What do you actually do with your life? And how is it compatible with the person that you want to spend time with? And to me, that is it. That is the thing. You know, it the obsession with like being compatible on this label identity level, I think is just a red herring. I think it's a distraction.
What kind of things would you do when you would have those times of frustration, right? Feeling like you weren't meeting expectations of parents, maybe not meeting expectations of Chloe at certain points in your relationship. Just a frustration with having to be patient. What were some of the things that you would do? Are you usually one to put like thoughts on paper? Is there a hobby that you do to maybe like calm yourself down, process your thoughts?
Yeah, so personally, I love to write, and I'll pick a topic, like for instance, like just people who are different in one major way, and I'll just kind of just let things flow with my thoughts on paper, like with typing, and pretty much what that does for me is it gets my thoughts just out of my head into a very tangible way to see, and it allows me to also branch out into new ideas, because like I think when you're just in your head, you kind of get in patterns of thought that just keep going. But when you kind of let it flow out in the same way it flows out when you talk to someone, like in therapy, you start seeing new branches come out of the tree of the idea. And that is usually how I work through things myself and come to new insights, is by just allowing that flow to happen. But yeah, also meditation, yoga. I think sometimes thinking through it with just like words and thoughts, etc., is not always the way to go. Sometimes you need to just uh, allow yourself to just become mellow, to just ease your mind, to let your mind ease. And at that point, you'll start to get some more clarity on things. But yeah, those are the kind of approaches I take.
When did you know that you wanted to marry Chloe? Like when was like that moment where you were like, yeah, no, I think today's the day. I'm gonna start setting everything up to do it.
Dang, it's hard to think of a precise moment, because it was on my mind from a very early time. But let me think for a second. I remember, yeah, I remember there being a point where I was wrestling with the idea of like settling, right? I've wrestled with this my entire life of like, am I settling for a job I dislike? Am I settling for like, you know, not trying as hard as I can in anything that I pursue?
Right.
Am I settling for my relationships? You know, and I think I really started thinking about that super heavily at one point with Chloe, because I'm like, okay, I'm really far in now. Let's really start to think about this, because this is what always happens to me. I always feel eventually like I'm settling. And I got to a point where I pretty much just sat down for like maybe a couple hours each day for like a week or a couple weeks. And I was writing about it, I was thinking about it, and it was just apparent to me in every single way that this is like, this is not something I can look at as, oh, maybe I'll find something better out there, Like, this is the most meaningful relationship I've ever had in my entire life. And if we look at something like that as maybe there's something better out there, because maybe there fucking is.
Yeah. Right.
That line of thinking can be applied to every moment of your life.
Right.
But that is a toxic thought. That is a thought that is exactly the opposite of gratitude. And I think that is the emotion I felt when I first started really thinking I want to marry Chloe. Is it was just immense gratitude. Like, I don't need to obsess over trying to find the best possible, exceptional, compatible person I can find on this entire planet.
Right.
That is just one, it's not realistic, because I keep saying this, people are complex. Finding a person who's just compatible in every single way, one, is probably not even worthwhile, because if you're compatible in every way, you're not going to be challenging each other in a lot of meaningful ways. But it's like do you quit watching a good movie right now just because you know you're gonna like a better movie later? It's just stupid. Like, no, right. I'm gonna enjoy this movie while it lasts, while it's a good movie. And I think the movie of my and Chloe's relationship is the best one I've seen. Right. It is by far the most fulfilling and meaningful and just all around worthwhile pursuit I've had in my life. And I started thinking, why am I so focused on trying to find the best anything when I have this right now? You know, let me just have some gratitude that this person's in my life, that we get to go through this thing together.
Right.
Because this is it. You know, this moment is all I have right now. I might die in 10 days. Who fucking knows, man?
Yeah.
And I'm going to break this off just to maybe pursue a better option elsewhere. To me, that was just absurd. And it still is. And I think that was a big line of thought that allowed me to feel like I'm ready to marry Chloe.
Right. So along with marriage, right? I'm sure there's. Well, I know because my best friend. There's a lot of talk of moving in together, getting your own place, right? So this is something that has been prevalent in my relationships in the past. I know it has in yours as well. What are your thoughts on moving in prior to marriage? How is it different, right? A lot of times for our partners, and kind of what their families want from them, what they themselves think they want, and what are the different approaches that we can take to that, so that both ends of the or both partners are happy with the final decision.
Damn, that is a tough question. So for Chloe and I, we started talking about this before we even like really nailed down that we wanted to get married. Because for me, I was like, I want to move in long before I get married.
Yeah.
Because to me, the really important things of marriage are just living with the person. Like that to me is one of
it's the main difference.
That's the main thing of marriage is you're now living with this person, you're sharing your life in almost every way,
day by day.
So to me, I'm like, this is the test for marriage, because like, why would you reverse those? Why would you say I commit till death do us part and then move in, which is the actual thing that tests whether you are compatible? So to me, that was a big sticking point. And for Chloe, it was the complete opposite. She had done some research herself that like people who move in together before they get married actually end up not staying together as much. And I didn't look into it, but I take her word for it.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but we're not a statistic. Anyways, anyway. So but for her, it is and was very largely because of her family, and it is a very big thing to ask from me to Chloe. Like, move in and just deal with how fucking hard it's going to be with your parents, just obsessing over this and like holding it over you and calling you and telling you what mistake you're making.
I was gonna add to that because I was on a similar boat not too long ago, about a year ago or so. I was gonna say, do you think selfishness plays a big role in that? In you basically, you want to just start this life, get it going with this person, and they're kind of like, because the way I see it is, really, there's not much, like, it would not benefit her at all to move in with you. It would only add stress. And you could argue that, in a sense, it would add stress to you by not, you really want to move in with someone. It's adding stress to you because you're like, oh man, I just really want to do life with you already, but we can't. I would argue that, you'd add stress to yourself, but on the flip side, you would add stress to her and then to both her parents as well.
Right.
And then that would just, that could be cause for more problems in the long run.
So yeah, I totally understand that as well. So I think where I was at is kind of at odds with what I described with the gratitude thing. Because where I was at was, I think I even told this to Chloe, was we may not be as compatible as we think we are. When people, there's a reason people get divorced It's because they start living together and they realize they're not compatible.
Mm.
So, from my point of view at that time, I was like, if we move in together, we might start to see things that have valuable information for the rest of our marriage if we decide to get married. So it makes sense to like do a stress test on the relationship, you know?
No, I think that's good.
So that's kind of where I was at. I was like, whatever conflict may arise at this, you know, non-conforming moving in before marriage prospect, is going to be, whatever conflict arises from that is going to be less significant than the conflict of marrying someone that you feel incompatible with.
Mm.
I have since changed on that point of view, as you can tell by my last speech on gratitude,
Right.
where I don't feel the need to stress test our relationship anymore, and
Right.
it's it is going back to what I talked about gratitude. It's like I don't need to obsess over like, is this going to be perfect? You know, is this relationship going to be perfect? Because of course it's not going to be fucking perfect. That's that's impossible. You know, it's an unrealistic thing for it to be
Right.
perfect. Any relationship is going to have some incompatibilities. It just takes a recognition that you're willing to work through those things that are potentially incompatible.
Mm.
That you're willing to 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 value each other's well-being over whatever selfish, you know, thing you might have that you would rather have when you live with someone. Like, let's say they don't like to cook. Okay, you know, I can get over it, you know? Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, oh, they don't like doing the taxes. Okay, I can get over it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how willing are you
Right.
to be with this person?
Right.
And yeah, I got to a point where like I'm more than willing to go through whatever things might come that we haven't addressed
Right.
when we move in.
Right.
And I have nothing but confidence that we can get through whatever.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too is mentality, and that's one thing that I've been learning, especially this past year, is that your mentality on the things that are put in front of you really changes the outcome of them, right? So, for instance,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you have full confidence in yourself that things are going to work out. Already going in with that mentality, you're going to have better outcomes than if you go in with doubt, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, sometimes it's not even about being 100% sure. It's just having that confidence and saying, hey, no, I have a strong mentality. I know what I need to do. You know, and we talked about this a little bit last time, is that discipline to be able to do the things that you don't want to do. Once you start making it, you know, a habit, once you start disciplining yourself, getting your mentality right, you know, and to add on, you know, since we're talking about relationships, I feel like it's also important to be in a pretty good mentality when you know, when you get with somebody.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to the point of marriage and therefore, right? A lot of times, you know, beginning in a relationship, there's obviously going to be things that you're going to have to work with each other on, and you know, no one, you know, comes completely without any problems. You know, off the bat, there's always a lot of things to work through, individually as people, and then as partners, as a couple. So, from what it sounds like right now, is mentality can change a lot of things. I'm sure in the beginning, your mentality of, oh man, our chemistry, we're, you know, it's very fluid. Your mentality is, oh, this is great. Like I want to keep doing this. I want to work towards this, right? So it's yeah, having that mentality to know that you can do whatever you need to do with this person, and staying strong with them or for them a lot of times, and them staying strong for you as well.
Yeah, and Chloe actually had something that really struck me when we had one of our first serious talks about moving in for marriage, which was, she was like, she was basically talking how I am now. So she was ahead of me, you know. She beat me to the punch, and she was like, I've seen how we work through problems. You know, like we have always solved problems with each other's best interest in mind.
Right.
That has always been our focus with conflict. Is it's never been an argument. You know, all of our arguments are just trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
And when you have that foundation, this is Chloe's words.
Yeah.
When you have that foundation, uh, you can overcome almost any obstacle that comes in the way, right?
Right.
When you have the foundation of I care about this person's well-being far, far, far more as a priority than whatever selfish desire I might have, whatever like ideal situation I might want.
Right.
That to me is the most important thing in this relationship. And since we both have shared that in all of our conflicts, she pointed that out. She's like, whatever moving in might entail, it will certainly uh, allow us to problem solve in the same way we already have. And like,
Right.
she's like, that foundation is the most important thing. We've got it. So to me, that's a really important thing for whether you think like you're going to be able to deal with some conflicts in the future is like, do you have that shared interest? Um, or is it more of like, what does this relationship do for me?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Right.
that was great. And
Yeah.
she kind of got me thinking on this. She got me thinking this way. So I think it was really good.
Cool. Um. Well, that's pretty. I mean, we're at like the hour
All
mark
right.
or so. So I don't know if you had anything to add. Any last couple things about your relationship or something that you think could benefit others? I don't know, a story, closing story, something.
Yeah. I think one thing is you can't try to change your partner. You can't try to change anyone in your life.
Yeah.
That is never going one, it's probably not gonna be a good time, like it's gonna be met with a lot of like bashing of heads if you're trying to change someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can't be the focus.
Yeah.
So I think what the focus should be is instead of trying to change them, try to understand them first. So usually when you're trying to change someone, it's because of like some short-sightedness. At least this is what I've seen. Is like when I've tried to change Chloe, it's usually because I haven't thought through what it is I'm trying to change and whether it's worth my trying to change it.
Right.
So that's one thing. But the way that people change is not by someone trying to change them. The way people change is by people giving them the space and the safety to feel like I'm not just wanting you to change for my own selfish desire. I'm wanting this for you and for our relationship. Like, I'm not just saying you need to change because I have a problem with you. Like
Right.
I I want to like help you with through this thing. And
Right.
it's not so much like, hey, I want you to not be a Christian anymore, and I think that's going to be in your best interest. It's
Right.
like actually talking through what might be in their best interest,
Right.
instead of like assuming that you already know what's best for the person or what you think is best for you for them to change. Just talk to them openly about it and with the disclaimer that you're not trying to change them because like you have this issue
Mm.
that you think is like this selfish desire.
Like
Um,
saying, I want you to go to the gym because I want you to look better
yeah,
versus I want you to go to the gym because it's going to help your mental health, like, and your physical health.
yeah, and yeah, that's a really good example because that's probably what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
But there's so many good reasons to be motivational and to be, you know, giving giving not just motivation but like encouragement. I think that's the spirit that help should be done instead of trying to change,
Mm.
encourage them to be like working towards a better ideal and instead of like you're lacking, it's like hey, I think you're capable of doing this, and like I like challenge each other in a compassionate way.
Right.
And I think that's how meaningful growth and change happens in a safe way. And for mine and Chloe's relationship has been huge. So that's the last thing I think is been been really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing about your relationship, the trials and the successes that you've had with Chloe, and kind of like where you're at and how navigating through family and everything went. That being said, if you guys have any questions, uh, feel free to message us. We have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. You can find it all on the links in our about section. Here on Twitch, we'll also be uploading this video to YouTube, so you guys can see it whenever you want on there. Either there or here on Twitch is usually where they stay at. So please, if you guys have any questions or if there's any specific topic you want us to talk about, if you want to be featured in, we're experimenting with a lot of different ideas, from Zoom calls. Today we did an audio only podcast just because we want to bring variety to the podcast and um, see what it's like, just audio with video, different kinds of features. So we'll kind of work through that and kind of see what you guys like, and just really to continue sharing experiences with you, whether it be our own or whether it be our friends or families or eventually strangers as well. So that being said, we'll go ahead and upload some of these videos, and we'll go from there. Let us know what you think about the audio only. Typically, podcasts are done like this, unless you're Joe Rogan and you have a freaking great personality. You got facial expressions and all this other stuff, right? For us, we're experimenting. So let us know what you think. Any questions, please reach out to us. We will be more than happy to respond, and to talk to you guys about whatever it is you guys have going on. If you guys want advice or just someone to hear you out, please feel free. That being said, thank you, Sammy, again for this conversation. And we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.